This is the battle of the heavyweights. Yes, the Toyota Fortuner and the Ford Endeavour are truly giants when it comes to the large SUV space. But which one is better and which one should you put your money on? Let's find out on the show today. Well, so here I'm inside the cabin of the new Toyota Fortuner, and Toyota really has worked very hard to improve the quality over here, and perceived quality levels are phenomenal to say the least. And the top of the dashboard as well as the top of the door pad are made with very good quality of plastics. It also feels a lot more upmarket as well as luxurious from the outgoing Fortuner. Now in terms of features, you get a very exhaustive list. You get 4 disc brakes, you get 7 airbags inside the cabin, you also get hill climb as well as hill descent assist, and you also get cruise control on the Fortuner, and it does feel like you are sitting in a very posh and expensive SUV. Well, so when you compare it with the all-new Fortuner, the cabin of the new Endeavour does not look as striking or as stylish. But that said, the quality of the Endeavour is as good as the one on the Toyota Fortuner. And you get this nice leather on top of the dashboard. You also get some leather over here in the door trims. Well, one area where the Endeavour is clearly ahead of the Fortuner is in the features list. And not only do you get a lot of bells and whistles to keep you comfortable, you also get this terrain management system. So how do you use Ford's terrain management system? Well, all you need to do is simply move around this wheel depending on the surface that you're driving on, and the engine, gearbox as well as suspension will take care of the rest. Well, apart from that terrain management system, this car also gets a really huge sunroof, something that the Fortuner does not offer even as an option. So your kids can actually stand up from a driving car if they are in the hills and enjoy the fresh air. But of course, if you are in the city, then it's advisable to keep it closed because DTC buses and people might do some Swachh Bharat. Well, one more feature which is worth talking about is the parallel park assist, and all you need to do is simply click on this button over here, and the car will let you know if there is a parking space and how you should fit into it, and the steering wheel will automatically move. All you need to do is simply engage reverse as well as first gear, and this car will do the rest with the steering. So overall, it is a car which comes with a lot of features, but if you want to know all the features, you should head to our website by clicking on this link over here and finding them out for yourself, and realizing why this car is ahead of the Fortuner in the features and comfort department. Well, so if you are someone who enjoys being chauffeur driven in, then you should really enjoy the back seat of the new Toyota Fortuner. And as you can see, headroom is more than adequate, even for someone who is my height, which for reference is 5'10". That said, the other good point about these seats is the fact that you can of course slide them forward or take them back. And also the Fortuner is a pretty wide car at the back, which means that having 3 occupants over here over long journeys should not be a problem at all. And you also get your own AC vents in all 3 rows, which means that no one should be complaining about the AC inside this car. Well, so in terms of the front seat, it is the Endeavour which wins this battle simply because it comes loaded with a lot of comfort features. But when you compare the 2 cars in terms of the rear seat comfort, it really is neck and neck, because as you can see, headroom is more than adequate, and I have adjusted the front seat as always for my driving position, and I have place below them where I can stretch my feet. Well, just like the Fortuner, there's a big hump in the floor panel over here, and that's because remember, these cars are of course 4x4. They offer you off-roading capabilities. But that said, it is the Endeavour which has better leg room for the person who's sitting here in the middle. And why is that? Well, because the footwells are pretty large enough to accommodate the feet of whoever will be sitting here. So this car has a slight advantage over the Fortuner in terms of sitting 3 abreast. And just like the Fortuner, you can also move this second row of seats forward or slide all the way back depending on who's sitting at the back and how much space they really need. But yes, as I mentioned, in terms of overall second row seat experience, both these cars are really neck and neck. Well, so here I'm in the last row of the Fortuner seats, and as you can see, headroom is pretty decent, and even if I really do sit very upright, I still have about a couple of inches above my head. So what that means is that even for someone who is about 6 feet in height, it should not be a problem sitting in these seats. Well, the seat squab over here now is in its full forward position, but the incline is at its halfway position, and even then I have decent place over here. And what that means is that the Fortuner is a genuine 7-seater, unlike a lot of other cars which pretend to be 7-seaters. Well, so here I'm in the last row of the Endeavour seats, and the middle row has been moved all the way forward, and even then I do have a little bit of space here between the backrest of this seat as well as my knees. So surprisingly, the last row of the Endeavour is pretty good. Headroom is also just about okay, and usually the last row of seats are best left for kids or people who are about 5'1" or 5'2". But in the Endeavour, you can actually have two full-size adults sit over here for the short city trips. Well, not only is there place inside the Endeavour's last row, the seats also have good comfort. They're not very thin. They offer you excellent cushioning as well as good amounts of support for your lower back. Well, so in terms of overall space with all the three rows up, it is more or less the same in both these cars. But one big advantage that the Endeavour has is that you can drop down the last row of seats by simply pushing this button over here, and you can also bring them back up by using that button. So that is something that really is excellent because it gives you a sense of comfort as well as luxury inside the car. Well, so the Toyota Fortuner comes with two engine options. There's a 2.8 litre diesel, which I am driving at the moment. Now this car makes about 177 bhp of power as well as 420 Nm of torque, which are very good figures. There's also a petrol motor. Yes, Toyota have introduced a petrol motor finally on the Fortuner, and that's a 2.7 litre engine, which makes about 166 bhp of power. Well, so Toyota has worked hard on improving the noise as well as vibration levels on this car, and even though there is that typical engine clatter when you start off from cold, as the heat builds up after a couple of kilometers or a couple of minutes, the engine settles into a quieter hum, and it's only when you really rev it hard that you can make out that there is a diesel engine powering this car. But that said, the engine noise is at a distance. It does not feel very close to you, and that's a pretty good thing. Well, so one area where this car definitely is behind its main rival, the Ford Endeavour, is in the overall handling as well as agility. Now, even though both these cars are big and bulky SUVs, the Endeavour definitely has the advantage over the Fortuner when it comes to overall handling. Well, not only is the Fortuner's ride very comfortable and very cushiony over slower city speeds, it also offers you a very corseting ride as the speeds rise. Well, the diesel engine as well as the petrol both come with 6-speed manual as well as automatic gearboxes. Now, the manual gearbox is decent to operate. The throws are light and they don't really need a heavy hand to shift. Now, the 6-speed automatic gearbox comes with the paddle shifters here behind the steering wheel, which means that you can shift gears manually and you get some sense of what it is to drive an F1 car. And if you're someone who enjoys driving, then you really need to put this car and keep it between 2 and 4,000 RPM to get the best from this engine. Well, so the Ford Endeavour comes with two diesel engines. There's a 2.2 which makes about 157 bhp, and there's the 3.2 which we are driving at the moment, which makes about 197 bhp of power. And this 3.2 litre engine on the Endeavour is a lot more powerful than the engine on the Fortuner, both in terms of the outright bhp figures as well as the torque that it delivers. Well, so the first thing that you will notice about this TDCi motor is the fact that it is very responsive, and unlike other typical common rail diesel engines which only become responsive after 2000 RPM, this one starts becoming responsive to throttle inputs from roughly about 1600-1700 RPM, which is pretty good considering that it is a big engine. So if you are someone who drives a lot within the city limits yourself, then it is the Endeavour which you will pick up over the Fortuner, simply because that engine on the Fortuner starts feeling responsive only after 2000 RPM. Well, not only is the Endeavour's engine a lot more responsive than the Fortuner, it also feels a lot more refined. And not only is the cabin a lot more quieter when you start off from cold, it's also a lot more quieter when you are, of course, cruising on the highway. And this car is definitely a better bet for those long highway trips, because remember, the Fortuner's engine starts to become a little buzzy inside the cabin when you are doing speeds of about 100-110 kph on the highway, but this one remains very quiet and very peaceful. Well, in terms of overall highway stability, there's little to choose between both these cars. They're both equally as good, and both of them remain very pliant as well as very comfortable on those long highway trips. And even when you are in the city, it's really neck and neck between both these cars. But yes, the Endeavour suspension feels a little more cushiony, does seem to soak in the bumps slightly better than the one on the Toyota Fortuner. But as I just mentioned, it really is neck and neck in terms of overall ride as well as comfort. Well, one area where the Endeavour clearly is ahead of the Fortuner is in terms of the overall steering feedback. This one feels a lot more crisper as well as a lot more communicative, and it makes the Endeavour a lot more agile. Even though it is a big and heavy bulky SUV, it feels a lot more agile than the Toyota Fortuner. And even though people will not really be pushing this car into corners on those hilly sections, if you are someone who enjoys driving, then you should definitely pick up the Endeavour, simply because it feels a little more dynamic than the Toyota Fortuner. Well, the best part about the Endeavour has to be the steering wheel. When you're driving at slow city speeds in the city, it remains pretty light, which means that you can, of course, maneuver it around without too many hassles and without having to build too many muscles. And when you take it out on the highway, the steering wheel seems to add a lot more weight, and starts feeling a lot more responsive, and that adds to a feeling of confidence when you take this big and heavy SUV out on those long highway trips. Another area where the Endeavour feels slightly better than the Fortuner is in the gearbox department, and the automatic gearbox on the Endeavour is definitely ahead of the one on the Fortuner, simply because it does not feel hesitant to go up or down when you want quick acceleration, and it also works very well when you're of course using it in manual mode, because there's minimal lag in terms of the gear shifts. Well, because this is a bigger engine than the one on the Fortuner, there's a lot more power reserved towards the end of its red line, and what that means is that if you really want to push it hard on the highway, there's a lot more power reserve available towards the top end of the engine range, which means that overtaking is a much more breezier affair inside the Endeavour than it is inside the Fortuner. So overall, the Endeavour is clearly the better car for someone who drives himself in the city, for someone who drives a lot on the highway, and for someone who calls himself a keen driver. So overall, as a driving package, it is the Endeavour 3.2 which has a clear advantage over the Toyota Fortuner's 2.8-litre diesel engine. And Ford has managed to deliver all this, undercutting the Toyota Fortuner's price, which means that this really is a fantastic deal. Well, so overall, the Endeavour has a much more powerful diesel engine, which is also a lot more refined. It has a much more longer list of features, which makes the cabin feel like a more special place to be in. And it also comes at a much more competitive price than the Toyota Fortuner. And that's the reason why this car wins this comparison today. But if you're in the market for a slightly smaller SUV, then you should also check out our review of the Hyundai Tucson by clicking on this link over here. And as always, don't forget to subscribe by clicking over here. It's bye for now, and hope to see you soon.